I think generally speaking, I've had a very positive travel experience. I find particularly when I'm traveling abroad, I feel more free, less judged, um, as it pertains to race. Now, and versus where when I'm in the United States, when we're moving, we're constantly thinking about, where we're moving, how we're moving because of our race. So, yeah.
Hey, welcome to Travel Tuesday Happy Hour, where we interview dope people doing dope things from around the world. Today we have an amazing guest. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamilah Leonard on social media. You can find my tag as Cultures Diva. In terms of what I do professionally, I am a corporate trainer. So basically, the corporate learning arm of a nonprofit in terms of learning and development. But on a personal level, I'm very much into the cultural arts. I'm very much into travel, hence why I'm here today. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, awesome. So what about the cultural arts that draw you in?
I particularly like the fine arts. I'm really into, I'm actually ironically not an artist myself, but I really just love, collecting. And also I'm just like an art enthusiast in terms of visiting different galleries, supporting Black arts in particular. That is very important. Art, a lot of times people just view it as, something to view, but it also has value. A lot of people don't think about that in terms of, you know, increasing your wealth per se, as a means to increase your wealth. We think about stocks, we think about things like that, but art can also be a pathway to increasing wealth too. But, just on a personal level, I just enjoy, being around the visual arts and just the arts period. Hence, my little nickname, Cultural List Diva. Ever since I was young, enjoyed being immersed around cultural things, whether it's, like I said, music, visual arts, dance, whatever, So that's something that I really enjoy. And it also forms how I travel too and what I tend to partake in when I'm traveling abroad.
Oh, wow, appreciate that. So what got you into traveling in the first place? Like, is there this one thing that led to you just getting the travel bug and wanting to immerse yourself in multiple cultures?
Yeah, I would say it really started in high school. I went to in high school for international affairs, and we were adopted by the World Affairs Council and the UN. And I got a lot of exposure in high school about different cultures, and that really piqued my interest at that time. And then I would say once I was in college, I had an opportunity to, with my School of Business, I went to Clark Atlanta University for all those HBCUs. But through Clark Atlanta University, I had an opportunity to take a trip with the graduate school. Even though I wasn't a graduate student, somehow I talked my way onto this trip with the graduate school, and it was a joint trip with NYU to South Africa. And that really opened my eyes in terms of international travel. But, ever since I was young, I always had an interest in travel, period. I don't just view travel as international travel. We have our whole United States, which is our backyard to discover, whether it's something in your own home state or the surrounding states or taking a road trip that requires a couple of hours. So, when I say travel, and having an interest in travel, it doesn't just mean international travel. It really was peaked right here at home, through my parents, my grandmother. She always took me on trips when I was younger. So I would say it's a multitude of things that kind of piqued my interest in travel. But domestically, I would say my family took an interest in making sure that I saw things when I was younger, and internationally, definitely, just going to the School for International Affairs, and then through my first travel abroad experience to South Africa, in college.
Okay, okay. So what was that experience like? I mean, and where are you from originally, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm originally from Philadelphia,
Okay.
born and
So
raised.
so from Philly down to Atlanta and then finding your way in South Africa. Like
Yes.
that's massive. You know,
Yeah.
what was that what was the feeling like? Yes, you know, from Philly we can get to Jersey, New York, Virginia, DC, kind of easy, and it becomes normal. We forget that it's traveling, and
Right.
so you're now getting a passport. You're now
Yeah.
getting, you know, all of these things that you need to prepare. How were you feeling at this time that like led you up to going? And then please share how did you feel once you got there?
I was very excited. Like you said, it was my first passport. For me, it was my first passport. So, I was very excited to, get there, really immerse myself in the culture. That particular trip was centered around, also getting to know about business in South Africa. So it opened my mind on a business level as well. And yeah, it was really good. I had it was a good mixture of a cultural experience and also, a business experience in terms of getting to know the economy at that time. And you also have to, well, I don't want to age myself or give away my age, but I'm 45 years old, and at that time, South Africa really wasn't that far removed from the end of apartheid, so it really was an interesting time being there. While it was exciting to have my first trip to the motherland, at the same time, dealing with the dynamics there at the time was very interesting. They were very much at that time still adjusting to, you know, um, a democratic, environment, not being under the thumb of apartheid. But even though apartheid had technically ended, racism was very much still alive in that country. So we experienced some of that actually. But there were a lot of positives, and so much so that later on, after I graduated, somehow I also found myself in an opportunity to get a fellowship to return. So, yeah, I have a deep affinity and love for South Africa for a number of reasons. It was my first travel abroad experience. Through my first trip there with my school, and then later on through my fellowship, where I actually had a chance to live there for a while and develop great lifelong friendships that I still have to this day. South Africa holds a very special place in my heart.
So for your the program through your school and your fellowship, where exactly did you go
Hmm.
in South Africa?
Okay, so the first trip I went with my school, with the graduate school. We went to Johannesburg and to Cape Town. And when I lived there with the fellowship, I actually was stationed in a city called Durban. Is in the state of KwaZulu Natal, which is off of the east coast of South Africa, right off of the Indian Ocean. So Cape Town is more, near the Atlantic Ocean, and Durban is right off of the Indian Ocean.
Okay, and then living in South Africa, what was that like? Because I mean, you know, I mean, I visited Ghana, I visited South Africa, but I went to Cape Town, so that's more metropolitan, right?
Right.
But you got to live in what sounds like more of a not so metropolitan. Was it more rural in the area where you were, or it was a city as well,
Yeah, it
a
was a city.
larger
Durban
city?
is a city as well. The program that I was a part of was called the International Women in Development Program Fellowship Program, and there was, several of us. Some of us were stationed in South Africa in different cities. I was stationed in Durban, which is a city, but some of them were stationed in rural areas such as St. Elizabeth. So yeah, it just really depended. Some people were actually in other countries other than South Africa. But yeah, I was stationed in Durban, which is a city.
Okay, so what was that experience like compared to, I mean, Atlanta, compared to Philadelphia, compared to anywhere? Like, did you feel like, I mean, I know this is your second time around, but did you
Hmm.
feel like a fish out of water trying to figure things out, or did your first time really prepare you for this trip?
There definitely were some adjustments. I mean, for the most part, when you are traveling, I would say when you're a tourist to South Africa, you don't necessarily have to learn any of the local languages that they have there because most people do speak English. But I did have a different experience. The second time around living there. Again, most people spoke English, but when you are living there, you're actually having real, day to day personable experiences with people. So yeah, I did have to pick up some of the language at that time. In fact, the program that I was a part of, fellowship program that I was a part of, they did a pretty good job at trying to prepare us somewhat. I wouldn't say that I was fluent by any means. And the local dialect there, which was Zulu. There's several different languages in South Africa, ranging from Zulu to Xhosa to Swana. So I was in, again, the KwaZulu Natal state region, and the primary language there is Zulu. So, I picked up some different phrases at that time to make my, transition a lot easier. So I would encourage, if you're going to have a living experience there, definitely try to pick up a little bit of the local language. Again, you don't have to be an expert, but at least try to pick up some of the key phrases to help you travel around. I was, taking a local uh, bus. I really immersed myself in the culture. They call them kumbies, where you basically it's a taxi, but a whole bunch of people get in, and you stop at different stops. So yeah, I really the second time around had an opportunity to really immerse myself a lot more deeply in the cultural role experience, and just the living experience in South Africa as well. Even though I was in a city, again, at that time, South Africa was still adjusting, and it really was a tale of two worlds where, it was really good to see, a lot of the brothers and sisters over there, being able to, benefit economically, but there was very much still, not just racial issues, but economic disparity issues over there as well. So, for example, I lived in the college area, and right down the street, you would see like what they call shanty towns, where um, there were makeshift houses, right down the street from a neighborhood. So, you know, it definitely was eye opening. It definitely gave me an appreciation, for what we have here in this country as well.
It's that's good because you kind of led to what I was going to ask you. Like, a person that is all about the culture, having submerged in that culture, what would you say you were able to take back from that culture that kind of, let's say, change your perspective on things?
Really, like I said, it's not to take things for granted. Definitely, just have an appreciation for basic things like, our economic situation. Now, granted, here in the United States, people have different economic situations too, but poverty there and poverty here, in my experience, are like on two different levels. So, for example, people may not have any electricity or running water. And certainly you can find those situations here in the United States too, right? But, like I said, the concentration of the poverty that I saw at that time was a lot, it was a lot bigger than, what I have experienced here in the States. So it definitely gave me appreciation, just for being grateful for having those opportunities. But it also, on a flip side, gave me an appreciation for overcoming the people of South Africa are very strong, to be under the thumb of apartheid, and being able to overcome that. It really just gave me a lesson of resilience, how to be resilient as well.
Nice, nice. So from there, what keeps you traveling? Like, what is that one thing that just continues to feed the itch to want to keep moving and exploring new countries?
Well, not to get into the zodiacs, but I do kind of believe in that a little bit. My
Okay.
sign is a Sagittarius, and I think I'm very true to the aspect of the Sagittarius where, we are explorers. We just enjoy learning about new things, and that's very much me. I am not satisfied with just, my usual settings. Even when I'm here in the States, and then let's say I can't even go on a trip, if I have the opportunity to take a road trip, go somewhere, learn about something new, that's the drive that keeps me wanting to travel. Learning something new, getting exposed to something new. I'm just naturally a curious person. So that's the thing that really keeps me traveling.
That's great. That's great. I'm curious too. So I'm always looking for new places to discover. As you know, I'm a photographer as well. So for me, it's all about being able to capture those like just awe moments. You know what I mean? And the beautiful scenery that the world has to offer.
Hmm.
Earlier you mentioned apartheid, right?
Right.
And as a woman of color that travels, was that the most um, was that the most aggressive form of, let's say, racism or mistreatment that you've experienced in all of your travels, or has it have you experienced that? I mean, of course, outside of the
Hmm.
United States, because depending on where you go, we're more welcome than we are in other places. So,
Right.
what have
Right.
you been? What have you been experiences been like?
I think generally speaking, I've had a very positive travel experience. I find particularly when I'm traveling abroad, I feel more free, less judged, um, as it pertains to race. Now, and versus where when I'm in the United States, when we're moving, we're constantly thinking about, where we're moving, how we're moving because of our race. So yeah, I think South Africa was probably the most extreme example in terms of maybe having some negative experiences. But overall, I would say that even in South Africa, it was a very overall positive. I want to definitely convey was a positive experience. It opened my eyes in so many ways. Like even though I talked about the shanty towns and things like that, South Africa is very developed. A lot of times when people think about Africa, they think about it in a negative light. They don't realize that, because, they may just be um, going on what they see in the media, for example, they may not realize that there's whole cities, whole developed cities over in Africa, so
Yeah, yeah.
Africa is very progressive. Africa is rising still as we
Mhm.
speak. So, I definitely want to convey that message. I don't want the audience to leave thinking, that, South Africa or any African country is just a developing country. They, have whole cities and, you know, for example, in South Africa, I like to always say I compare Johannesburg to like a New York, for
Mm,
example. Um, in terms of the landscape, Cape Town, I would compare it to maybe like a San Francisco,
right, right.
and Durban, I would compare it to like a Miami. So, like,
Mm,
they're whole cities. People are doing, there's opportunities, for people of color here to travel there, business wise. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're looking to get into business, I would consider, a South Africa or any African nation. There's a whole movement, people, from the United States and other parts of the diaspora moving back home.
Oh yeah, and real estate in South Africa is very reasonable right now. So
Right.
I was there in 2017, and it was amazing just to see how once again, once we're not able to tell our story or
Right.
present our narrative, how it can be easily skewed to prevent us from realizing what resources are available to us in other countries. I'm gonna shift over to kind of where we are today, right?
Hmm.
So kind of where were you when the world shut down and you kind of had to like, go into seclusion, self seclusion, right? This is the time where, everything's pretty much shut down except for essential locations like the supermarket and the hospitals. How did the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown impact you in life?
Wow, how has it impacted all of us, right? It's really been an adjustment for sure. I think initially, at least in my mind, I knew it was a pandemic, but for some reason, I just didn't think that we were going to be in this for so long. So yeah, it's been an adjustment. I think in the beginning, I was more positive because for me, I'm always on the run, always busy. So I really saw it as an opportunity to just pause, take a breath, and relax a little bit and be more connected to my family and my friends, which I certainly did. Gave me the opportunity to do that. Maybe not in person, but thank God for technology, right? We have what we're doing right now. In terms of the video calls and phone calls. There was a lot of that. I think Zoom is awesome because I did everything from having book clubs to having happy hours to exercise classes online. So I was really doing okay in the beginning. In terms of where I was here in Philadelphia. I wasn't abroad or caught abroad, abroad trying to get back or anything. So I was here in Philadelphia and blessed enough to be able to transition working remotely. So I've been working home. And like I said, I kept myself busy, just making sure that I was fostering connections. But I think I really shifted once I started to have some personal experiences with knowing people who either caught the virus and or family members who passed away from the virus. So that was very hard. And then also as a black person in this country, mentally it was a shift because we were dealing with the COVID pandemic, but I say there was obviously another pandemic going on, right?
Right,
In
a
terms
racial
of
pandemic. Yeah, a racial pandemic.
right, a racial pandemic. So that was very. I didn't expect for it to hit me as hard as it did, but it really did hit me in a hard way. And I think that has been a challenge for all of us as Black people and people of color in this country. We're not just dealing with the COVID pandemic, but we're also dealing with the racial pandemic as well. So it's been an interesting trip, but just try to keep positive. And I think what's been helpful for me is also being mindful of self care. Sometimes people think, well, I'm working remotely, I'm working from home. You don't get stressed, but that's not true. You have to be mindful of making sure that you're practicing some form of self care, whatever that looks like for you. For me, it looked like journaling to really get my thoughts out on paper. It also looked like doing some yoga and meditation just to make sure that not only was my mind right, but my body and my spirit was right as well. So whatever that looks like for you. Also, um, you know, everybody's situation is different. Some people are around family members, such as myself, who are autoimmune compromised. Some people, may be single. Some people may be, married or with kids, everybody's situation is different. So I would just say, be kind, um, extend yourself grace. Everybody's situation is different. Some people are able to continue traveling, and I say kudos. Sometimes if you are a part of these different travel groups and blogs, some people pass judgment, and I'm like, don't pass judgment because, you know, as long as those people are taking precautions, I see no problem with that. Everybody's situation is different. And then on the flip side, if somebody is not traveling, I would say don't, make somebody feel bad because they're not able to travel either.
Right.
You never know what someone's situation is. And we just have to be kind and we just have to extend each other grace.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with all that because, you know, the pandemic gave a lot of people time to pay attention to a lot of things. As you alluded to, the civil unrest in the country, our own demons, right? Our thoughts, just realizing that we should be doing something with this time. And one of the things I realized that, I can't sit still, right?
Right.
But not just I can't sit still, I can't just sit and not do anything constructive. So for me, um, that time was spent creating this series of interviews or just discussions with people. For those that can't travel, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the good times of traveling. Let's talk about the
Mm-hmm.
bad times of travel. Let's talk about how this experience has changed you, right? And that's really why I did this, so that people can have this conversation. I like to equate this conversation into traveling mentally, because some of the questions I ask, require you to kind of travel back in time and remember the times that we had good times, exciting times, traveling times. Um,
Exactly.
and so, with that being said, like, how are you adjusting to the new normal of where we're living today, where we're open some days and then close other days, and the majority of the world's borders are closed out?
That's true. Well, it's definitely for me, like I mentioned, because I do have a family member who is autoimmune compromised. I haven't been able to really travel the way that I'm
Hmm.
used to traveling internationally, anyway.
Right, right.
I would say prior to the pandemic, I would take maybe 2 or 3 trips a year abroad. It's been zero
Mm.
for me. But I found ways also to adjust, so but particularly when the weather was better, I would try to at least, get out to an outdoor to do an outdoor activity, for example, anything from hiking to maybe visiting a farm to visiting a waterfall in my home state of Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't realize some of the gems that we have right here in our own backyard. So, there are ways that, if you are somebody like us who are not used to, standing still, that you can still do that and social distance and be responsible. So, yeah, that's how I've been coping. Now that the weather is, cold again, at least in the region that I'm in, I've, done things like ice skating, for example.
Nice.
Just trying to keep things where, I can still practice social distancing and being responsible to help me cope because it's hard for me
Mm.
um, in terms of, being isolated. I am a single woman, so it's not like I have someone living here with me. So I have to find ways to keep myself engaged in that regard. In terms of, things closing and opening, it's just a part of it. I personally have accepted that and am willing to do whatever it is that, we need to do so that we can get out of this. You have other countries there, they are doing a lot better than the United States. I would have thought that, we as a country, would have handled this a lot better. But obviously, as we all know, that hasn't happened for a number of reasons
Right,
without getting too political.
right.
But I just try to do my own, play my own personal part to do what I can, to make sure that hopefully we get out of this, man. I'm ready. I'm ready to be done with it.
You and me both. You and me both. So, because I like what you said about getting outdoors. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wasn't much of a hiker or an outdoors person, and being stuck indoors, you get a sense of claustrophobia. Um, I started hiking. I started biking. Anything I can do to get out the house, socially distance, of course, away from people.
Right. Hmm.
And then, yes, I am one of those people that if I found a COVID light country and that has the utmost precautions, that
Hmm.
I will go.
Yeah.
Actually, my first international travel was this past weekend where I went to Aruba, so that was amazing.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
it's still it's still not the same. You know what I mean? There was a walk around curfew where you couldn't be outside after 11, uh,
Hmm.
which kind of which deterred you from congregating with those that you've met up with or have met, or really just a late night dinner, walk around town, just to explore, which just leaves me to want to go back for when things get back to normal.
That's
So,
good. That's
um,
good.
but yeah, I mean, but it's one of those things where that travel is available for some of for those that know how to travel safe.
Yes.
Similarly, I care for my dad. I go visit my mom periodically, and I'm always taking the proper precautions to make sure that wherever
Hmm.
I'm going, when I come back, I quarantine. I actually don't even quarantine at my house, my own home, just to make sure he's okay.
Good.
Um, and so, I quarantined somewhere else for a couple days. Just took a COVID test negative, so I'm good there, right? But those are steps that we now have to take in
Yes.
order to be able to move around safe.
Yeah.
So
And I'm glad you mentioned testing. That's very important. I think that, that's one of the things that maybe we can, personally, take more responsibility to do, because, testing hasn't been that big of a priority, for our government, and other
Well,
countries
well, I will
where,
say that it's each one person is responsible
hmm,
for their well-beings, right? Because if
yes,
we rely on, and once again, not to get turned this to a political stance, but if everything we need we rely on the government to handle for us, some of
hmm,
it will never get done.
exactly,
I
exactly,
personally took on testing and taking certain precautions for myself because, if we don't care for our own and ourselves, nobody else will. I mean, once again, the underprivileged, underserved is our community.
exactly.
And the one of the biggest issues that we're experiencing right now is that there weren't enough people of color in the trials, so we really don't know how it impacts everybody. But at the same time, it's out here, and you will have people within our community that will choose not to take the vaccine. And so, with reason, I mean,
Hmm.
Tuskegee experiments, as well as other experiments that's been done in the past on our people, have led us with somewhat of a shell shock from taking anything advice from medical personnel.
Right.
But it's one of those things where, um, honestly, not taking it can mean as serious as death.
True.
So I'm not saying I'm an advocate. I'm not an advocate. I'm just saying do your research. Um, and if you really care for those that are important to you, it may be something that you want to seriously consider. Um,
Right. Right.
because it's going to it's going to turn into a yellow fever type of scenario, right?
I agree.
And
I
so,
agree.
you have venues and countries that are starting to put policies in place that if you haven't gotten a vaccine from either of the organizations, then you may run the risk of not being able to enter those countries.
Yeah.
And so you know, you can move around the United States. Um, they say ignorance is bliss, right? But it's not when it's life or death, you know.
That's true.
And so, to your point, yeah, it's one of those situations where, um, it was a toss up for me to really determine when to get it. But once again, I just registered in New Jersey for myself and my dad. Registered my mom in Pennsylvania because I think you could pre-register to get the vaccinations. So I pre-registered all of us because they're the most, impacted.
Vulnerable.
And
Right.
I have to make
Hmm.
sure that I'm in a good place to be able to still be around that. Like I haven't hugged my mom or kissed my mom since March, and I'm starting to see the emotional impact it's having on her and my dad. So yeah, definitely. And my sister, she's not gonna let me around my mom if I don't take it. So
Right.
so when the
You don't
doctor
have a
says you
choice,
gotta
huh?
do it, you gotta do it.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I like what you said. Definitely, for everybody, it's a personal decision, I personally haven't made a decision yet, but I definitely have been doing my research, like you said.
mhm,
Like at least, don't just go by, you know, what you may see on a Facebook post or Instagram post, Twitter, whatever. Do your due diligence, do your research, so that you can make an educated decision. That's all I ask of anybody. Wherever side you land, just do your due diligence and do your research, to make an educated decision. And in the interim, we just have to do our part in terms of making sure that we're social distancing. It's hard. It's really hard because, like I said, when we began this conversation, who knew that we would be in this whole thing for like almost a year now, right? Because when it first started, it was in like February, so most
yeah.
people started to shut down in March. Who knew we would be approaching almost a year of this whole social distancing thing? So I think for a lot of people it's really it's getting hard. They, like you said, they want to touch their mom, they want to kiss their loved ones and be able to interact with them like I have been around my parents because we're social distancing together. However, there are other family members where I haven't touched or seen them in almost a year, and it's emotionally it takes a toll, right, on us. And people tend to get fatigued, I guess,
Mhm.
for a lack of a better word, and start to take risks that may you know put us at risk. So I would just encourage people, to keep it up. It's hard. We're all in this together. Just try to do your part to social distance, wear your mask, and like you said, do your due diligence and research to consider. Seriously consider, taking the vaccine. And if it's not right for you, then that's a personal decision, and it is what it is. But at least do your due diligence, trying to um, do everything else that we can so that we can get out of this. We're all tired. I'm tired.
I
I'm ready to
completely
go back to
understand.
normal. But I really don't see that happening until probably 2022.
Right,
We'll get back
right.
to some sort sense of normalcy. So that's why it's still important for us to find ways to connect and foster those connections. And if you can travel safely like you've been do it. I am considering, maybe seeing what I can do for 2021. It probably won't be right away, but maybe mid-year or the end of the year, seeing what I can do as well. You have countries like Barbados that are
Yes.
offering the 1 year travel visa. So
Yes.
that
Or
could
you
be
could
an
just stay
opportunity
there. Yeah.
too. If you don't want
You
to necessarily go back and forth and you want to stay somewhere, look into countries like Barbados or other countries like that are offering this special visa as well. So there's been a lot of negatives that have come out of the pandemic, but there's been a lot of positive as well. People are reinventing themselves. Like you said, you took the time to start this wonderful, travel series. People are getting into entrepreneurship. There's all kinds of things that you can do
Yep.
and this pandemic to kind of reinvent yourself. But if you don't want to reinvent yourself, don't feel like you have to either.
There's a
A
lot of
lot of
content
times
out there to
people
enjoy
feel
yourself.
like they have to be doing something.
Yeah,
Extend yourself grace. You
for
don't
real.
necessarily have to.
For real. So I'm glad you mentioned your travels for this year, or
Hmm.
projected travels for this year. Like, what are what is what's your checklist look like when you're planning travel? I mean, of course, it's augmented now, but before, what would be the guiding guide to allow you to select the right location, the right time, and maybe even the right people? How do you decide where to go?
I'm very spontaneous. So I don't necessarily have a plan. Now, don't get me wrong. I do have a travel bucket list of places that I want to get to. But
Mhm.
in terms of how I decide when I'm going to get to them, it's just really about opportunity. A lot of times that really is how it happens. The last few of my trips have not been solo trips. They've been trips with other people who have invited me, and I'm just like, you know what? This is the year to yes, and I'm gonna go for it. So
What would be some tips that you would give somebody who's looking into traveling in 2021, that
mhm.
you would give them to kind of not miss out on opportunities?
I would say look, do your research about the country in terms of where they are with the virus, and what steps they're taking for travelers coming into the country. I mentioned Barbados because I think they're doing an excellent job with that. That country in particular requires you to, of course, get testing before you come, but when you're there, you have to quarantine either in a hotel, or they also have a state facility
Hmm.
where they'll provide you with accommodation, and you have to get retested. I believe it's 3 or 5 days
Yeah.
afterwards
Yeah.
as well. So I would say that going forward, for me, if I am going to travel to a country, it would be a country that's taking those type of precautions. That would make me feel a lot better. And just also educating yourself about what the rules are there. Like you said, when you were was it Aruba?
Yeah.
When you were in Aruba, there were regulations procedure, that you had to follow in terms of social distancing. And so, just do your research um, before you go to make a decision about what country is best for you. Unfortunately, the United States
We
is
don't have
not in the best position
we don't
because a
have a
lot
lot
of
of things.
countries are not even accepting us right now, right? So
Exactly.
that already kind of limits you in terms of what countries you're able to go to. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's going to be based on what procedures or precautions that country is taking, also what their own COVID rate is
Hmm.
in that country, and what kind of experience I can have while I'm there in this new normal, as you would say.
Yeah, I mean, look, I enjoyed the hot weather. I enjoyed the sun, some of the beach, and the food. I mean, food was amazing.
Hmm.
I'll say, of all the places, not maybe a 9 out of 10 of experiences that I had great food there. And so, with that being said, what do you have going on that you might want people to follow you on, and or just check you out? What are your social media handles?
Yeah, we can start with my social media. You can find me both on Instagram and Twitter. Hashtag with at Culturist. So that's CULTURIST _ diva. So Culturist Diva. And so, yeah, you can find me there. Check me out. Even like I said, I'm not really doing too much traveling now. You can certainly check out all of my travels on those pages. I've, been to I'm not as good as you, Purge, but I'm not doing too shabby. I'm not doing too shabby. I've been quite a few places. So yeah,
Listen,
you can check
you've
me
been
out and
to
see where
some
I've
mountains in
gone.
Pennsylvania. you done hiked all throughout. You did some hiking this year. So, don't sell yourself short now. But
Yeah.
I do want to say thank you for doing this.
Hmm.
We've known each other for a long time, and
We have.
this is a plus of the pandemic, right?
Hmm.
Being able to at least meet and just have this conversation about travel and being able to kind of reconnect. So I definitely
Absolutely.
appreciate you doing this, and like I said, the goal of this is to really make sure that um, people can see themselves doing what we do, which is travel, which is sharing our stories, which is um, finding a way to cope with what's going on right now by telling our stories, and travel doesn't have to always be getting on a plane and going overseas. It can just be a trip over the Jersey Shore or a trip
Yes.
down to DC or in the Poconos. So,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
definitely appreciate that. So
I love it.
thank you, and thank you again. All right.